After a decade of what has felt like non-stop immigration, Europe has reached breaking point.
Da oggi Lampedusa dice basta! Nessuno più! Questo messaggio deve passare sia all'Europa e sia al governo che i lampedusani sono stanchi!
With hundreds of thousands of people arriving onto the continent's shores in the last 10 years, European countries have taken in refugees from all over the world. And with most of these being men, women, and children fleeing horrible conditions back home, like war and conflict, it has often felt like countries in Europe had no choice but to take refugees in. But after years of being the global destination for refugees and migrants, Europe has had enough. And now, the European Union is changing its laws and, in effect, changing the fate of millions of refugees. So this is why Europe doesn't want migrants anymore.
The magnitude of migration challenges today requires us to give urgent, fast responses.
In 2023, as many as 380,000 people crossed into European borders irregularly, or some would say illegally. And that number was the highest since 2016. But it was also a 17% increase compared to 2022, which meant migrant arrivals into Europe had increased in each of the previous 3 years. Now, those numbers are a big deal for European leaders who have struggled to balance the need for compassion and taking in refugees from across the world with the real-life worries of the economic and social pressures within their own countries. All of which is why the European Parliament is now making a big change.
European Union countries have agreed on a series of sweeping reforms to its asylum system. After years of negotiations, member states agreed on new rules aimed at curbing irregular migration to the bloc. Migration has become a divisive issue across the EU, which has seen record numbers of migrants since 2015.
So, obvious question here, how exactly is the European Union changing its laws to slow down irregular migration? For starters, the new rules are designed to speed up the asylum process, which would also speed up the process of sending irregular migrants back to their home countries. Asylum requests will now be reviewed and processed within a maximum period of 12 weeks. And in cases where the asylum applications are denied, those asylum seekers will now be forcibly returned to their home country within the same 12-week period. Now, this also means that migrants will be subject to much tougher pre-entry screening procedures within the first 7 days, including health and security checks. But that's not all, because the new rules are also designed to ensure that any asylum claims with low chances of being accepted are processed even faster, without necessarily admitting that asylum seeker into European Union territory. And so those asylum seekers with high chances of rejection will now be placed in detention centers close to the European Union's external borders, which ensures that they will be deported even quicker. The new rules are also aiming to spread the burden of irregular migration more broadly across more European countries, relieving the pressure on frontline countries like Greece, Italy, and Spain, which have historically received the most asylum seekers. Now, because Greece, Italy, Spain, and Malta have borders on the Mediterranean Sea, they are usually the first point of arrival for hundreds of thousands of migrants who are arriving into Europe by sea. But now, the rest of the European Union will be required to also take in thousands of migrants from these frontline countries, or to provide them with extra funding and financial support to better manage the crisis. Now, this change in particular is a shift from the status quo in Europe, because in the past, based on the law known as the Dublin Regulation, European Union member states were responsible for processing asylum seekers who first arrived in the EU at their border, with little or no support from other member states or the European Parliament. So essentially, these new rules are looking to slow down the entry of migrants into Europe and to slow down frontline countries that have historically been most impacted by the wave of migration. So with faster pace of processing applications and a higher chance of getting deported, this is essentially betting that the new laws become a deterrent. Now, for their part, European Union leaders have described the new laws as a triumph and a move in the right direction. But here's the thing, it may be too early to start taking the victory lap with this, because not all European countries agree with this new approach. For instance, Hungary has vowed not to taking any irregular migrants regardless of the new laws. And the Polish Prime Minister has described the new process for taking in asylum seekers or paying frontline countries as unacceptable. And then of course, there are also questions about what these new laws mean for human rights. For instance, Amnesty International is predicting that the new laws would lead to a surge in suffering for asylum seekers, while the Red Cross says it is worried that the detention of migrants at borders could now become normalized in Europe. But despite all of that reasonable opposition, the bottom line here is that European leaders consider tougher rules on migration to be absolutely necessary after what has been a rocky decade. In some European countries, public opinion on migration has taken such a negative turn that it almost seems irreversible. For instance, Ireland has seen multiple public protests with citizens campaigning against immigration, and with some of these protests turning violent. And perhaps the biggest sign of the change in sentiment is seen in Sweden, which for many years was seen as the poster child for welcoming refugees and migrants over the past decade. But now even Sweden has taken a major shift on its stance of welcoming migrants, with the Prime Minister declaring that the integration of immigrants into the country has failed. And so after a decade of opening its borders, Europe is now making a U-turn. And the continent's leaders are hoping that this new approach, backed by a brand new law, actually works. But the thing is, nobody will know for sure that it works for the next 2 years at least, because the new laws will not take effect until 2026. And so until then, Europe and its leaders are playing a waiting game and hoping that in the meantime, things do not get worse. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this, then please subscribe to the channel and give the video a thumbs up as well, because that really helps the channel and supports me with making great videos like this one. And if you want a deeper understanding of how Europe's population dynamics make immigration almost necessary, then check out this video as well. See you in the next one.